My own family left me standing in a blizzard without a coat, calling me a burden who should learn to take care of herself. But they had no idea they were abandoning the woman who secretly controlled the $200 million trust fund that had been financing their luxury lifestyles, private school tuitions, and dream homes for the past 15 years, and whose signature on a single document would cut off every penny of their inheritance by spring. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and the financial empire my ungrateful relatives never knew I controlled, make sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me about your worst experience with family members who underestimated you and discovered just how wrong they could be. And subscribe so you never miss stories like this one, about what happens when people assume elderly relatives are helpless burdens and learn the devastating cost of abandoning someone whose generosity they had been taking for granted their entire lives. My name is Margaret Thornfield. I'm 70 years old, and this story begins on December 23, 2022, during the worst blizzard Chicago had seen in 30 years, when I made what seemed like a simple request for my son David and daughter-in-law Jennifer to drive me home from their holiday party. A request that would reveal their true character and teach them the most expensive lesson about treating elderly family members like disposable inconveniences rather than understanding the financial foundation their comfortable lives had been built upon for decades. But to understand how David and Jennifer Thornfield, the entitled couple who thought they could humiliate and abandon a 70-year-old woman in a snowstorm, ended up losing their $2.8 million house, their children's private school education, and access to the family trust fund that had been secretly funding their lifestyle, you need to know who I was before my carefully maintained image as a dependent elderly mother concealed one of the most powerful financial legacies in the Midwest. For 45 years I was Margaret Thornfield, senior managing partner and founding architect of Thornfield Capital Management, one of America's most influential investment firms controlling $12 billion in assets across real estate, technology startups, and blue-chip portfolios throughout the Great Lakes region. I wasn't just living on a fixed retirement income. I was the strategic mastermind responsible for building generational wealth worth hundreds of millions of dollars and controlling the investment relationships that determined which families maintained their prosperity and which ones discovered that financial security could disappear overnight when they violated the trust and respect that wealth required. My responsibilities encompassed managing investment portfolios for over 200 high-net-worth families throughout the Midwest, overseeing real estate developments that shaped Chicago's skyline and suburban expansion, coordinating with wealth management firms and private banks that handled the fortunes of America's most successful entrepreneurs, and implementing the financial strategies that preserved family legacies across multiple generations while ensuring that inherited wealth was used responsibly and maintained through sound investment principles and family values. But these achievements only tell part of the story about the complexity and critical importance of generational wealth management at the highest levels of American finance. When you're responsible for maintaining investment returns that determine whether families can afford their children's Ivy League educations, preserve their family estates through economic downturns, and pass substantial inheritances to future generations, every decision carries enormous weight and consequences that extend far beyond individual family finances to impact entire communities and charitable organizations that depend on family foundation grants and philanthropic contributions. During the 2008 financial crisis that destroyed millions of retirement accounts and eliminated generational wealth throughout America, I coordinated protective strategies that literally saved dozens of family fortunes and prevented the collapse of charitable foundations that supported hospitals, universities, and community organizations across the Midwest. Working 20-hour days for 8 months straight, I restructured investment portfolios in real time, negotiated with banks and creditors to prevent foreclosures on family properties that had been owned for generations, managed trust fund distributions that kept families financially stable during the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, and implemented emergency financial protocols that allowed wealthy families to maintain their philanthropic commitments while preserving their core assets for future recovery. I remember specifically working with the Henderson family, who owned a century-old manufacturing business in Milwaukee that employed over 500 people and supported their local community through substantial charitable giving. When the financial crisis hit, their business faced potential bankruptcy due to credit freezes and supply chain disruptions that threatened to eliminate not only their family fortune, but also the jobs and community support that their company provided to thousands of families throughout Wisconsin. I coordinated with emergency lending partners, restructured their debt obligations through strategic asset reorganization, and provided bridge financing from our crisis management fund that allowed the Henderson Manufacturing Company to survive the worst period of the recession while maintaining their workforce and continuing their community philanthropic programs. The company not only survived but expanded significantly during the recovery, eventually becoming one of the largest manufacturing employers in the Midwest and increasing their charitable giving to over $2 million annually. The Henderson family's success became a model for other family-owned businesses facing similar crisis challenges, and their story was featured in Forbes magazine as an example of how sophisticated wealth management and crisis planning could protect not only individual family fortunes, but entire communities that depended on family business success for economic stability and growth. Thornfield Capital Management specialized in multi-generational wealth preservation, strategic philanthropy, estate planning, and maintaining the complex relationships between family wealth, business operations, and community responsibility. A mistake in portfolio allocation could cost families millions of dollars in potential returns and threaten their ability to maintain their lifestyle and philanthropic commitments. Errors in estate planning could result in devastating tax consequences that eliminated generational wealth transfer and left families unable to preserve their legacy for future generations. Failures in crisis management could lead to complete financial ruin that destroyed not only family fortunes, but also the charitable foundations and community organizations that depended on family wealth for their continued operation and community impact. My expertise in high-level wealth management extended beyond our investment firm to consulting relationships with major banks including JP Chase and Goldman Sachs, philanthropic organizations like the Ford Foundation and Carnegie Corporation, and family offices throughout North America that managed billions of dollars in generational wealth for America's most successful families and their charitable foundations. I helped establish the wealth management protocols that determined which investment strategies were appropriate for preserving family fortunes across multiple generations, trained bank executives in the complex relationship between family dynamics and financial planning so they could properly advise wealthy clients about balancing personal needs with legacy preservation, and developed the philanthropic frameworks that smaller family foundations could use to maximize their community impact while maintaining their long-term financial sustainability. One of my most significant consulting achievements involved working with the Rockwell Family Foundation in Detroit, which managed over $500 million in charitable assets and supported education, healthcare, and community development programs throughout Michigan. The foundation was facing potential dissolution due to family disputes over philanthropic priorities and investment strategies, with younger family members pushing for aggressive growth investments while older generations insisted on conservative preservation strategies, creating conflicts that threatened to eliminate decades of community impact and charitable giving. I spent 3 years restructuring their investment approach, implementing balanced portfolio strategies that satisfied both growth and preservation objectives, and creating governance protocols that resolved family disputes by establishing separate advisory boards for different philanthropic areas, while maintaining unified investment management that preserved the foundation's financial stability and growth potential. The restructured foundation became so successful that it doubled its annual charitable giving within 5 years, while maintaining financial stability that ensured continued community support for generations to come. The foundation's success attracted attention from other family foundations throughout the Midwest, who adopted similar governance and investment structures, creating a network of coordinated philanthropic organizations that increased their collective community impact significantly. These consulting opportunities provided substantial additional income that enhanced our family's already considerable financial position, but more importantly, they gave me comprehensive understanding of how generational wealth affects family relationships, how financial dependence influences behavior and character, and how family members often underestimate elderly relatives' expertise and influence when they assume those relatives are simply living on retirement savings rather than recognizing their continued control over investment decisions and wealth distribution that could dramatically change family financial circumstances based on. The most disturbing cases I encountered during my wealth management career involved adult children who systematically exploited elderly parents' generosity and financial support, treating trust fund distributions and family gifts as entitlements rather than understanding that continued financial support required maintaining respectful relationships and demonstrating the character and values that justified generational wealth preservation and family legacy continuation. I witnessed situations where successful professionals, doctors, lawyers, business executives, who should have understood the responsibility that comes with inherited wealth, would manipulate their aging parents into providing financial support for increasingly extravagant lifestyles, while showing decreasing respect for the elderly relatives, whose lifetime achievements and investment expertise had created the family prosperity they were exploiting for personal advantage. I remember the case of Patricia Morrison, an 75-year-old widow whose son Michael convinced her to provide funding for his medical practice expansion while simultaneously moving her into a modest assisted living facility because her large family home was quote, too expensive to maintain, and she was quote, Patricia believed she was helping her son achieve his professional dreams while making practical decisions about her own living situation, but I discovered through financial monitoring that Michael was actually using family trust funds to finance a luxury lifestyle that included expensive vacations, country club memberships, and private school tuitions, while forcing his mother into substandard housing to reduce his financial obligations. Michael's exploitation became systematic and increasingly cruel as he gained control over more of Patricia's financial assets. He convinced her to sign power of attorney documents under the pretense of helping with financial management, then used this legal authority to redirect trust fund distributions toward his own accounts, while reducing Patricia's living allowance to levels that barely covered her basic needs in the inadequate assisted living facility. When I investigated further through our family monitoring protocols, I discovered that Michael had not only stolen over $400,000 in trust fund assets, but was actively planning to sell Patricia's family home and other valuable properties to fund his practice expansion, leaving his mother with minimal assets and no financial security for future healthcare needs or emergency situations. The emotional devastation to Patricia when she learned about this betrayal was heartbreaking. She felt that her own son had violated the trust and family bonds that represented her primary source of emotional support and connection during her elderly years. The financial abuse had eliminated not only her security, but also her faith in family relationships, and her ability to trust people who claimed to care about her welfare. But beyond professional achievements and expertise, my wealth management career had taught me invaluable lessons about respect, family responsibility, and how people's behavior changes dramatically when they believe they can exploit elderly relatives who appear to be financially dependent but may actually control significant assets and influence that could make or break their financial security, with decisions about trust fund distributions and inheritance arrangements. I had observed thousands of family financial dynamics during wealth management consultations and estate planning sessions over 4 decades. I had seen devoted families who honored elderly relatives' wisdom and included them respectfully in financial decisions, making efforts to ensure that generational wealth supported family unity while preserving resources for future generations through responsible spending and respectful treatment of the elderly family members whose lifetime achievements had created their prosperity. But I had also witnessed families who dismissed elderly members' opinions when financial convenience became more important than family relationships, who viewed trust fund distributions as automatic entitlements, rather than understanding that continued financial support required maintaining respectful behavior and demonstrating the character values that justified generational wealth preservation and family legacy continuation. These families treated elderly relatives as obstacles to their financial independence, rather than recognizing them as the sources of their prosperity and the guardians of wealth that could be redirected or eliminated based on family behavior and respect levels. These observations had given me sophisticated understanding of financial exploitation patterns and the warning signs that indicate when family members view elderly relatives' generosity as automatic entitlement, rather than understanding that family wealth requires maintaining respectful relationships and demonstrating the character that justifies continued financial support and inheritance arrangements. The warning signs were always similar: adult children who suddenly became very interested in helping with financial management when they needed money for major purchases or lifestyle upgrades, timing their attention to coincide with their financial needs rather than demonstrating genuine concern for elderly relatives' welfare and comfort. Family members who gradually gained access to elderly relatives' financial information, estate planning documents, and investment accounts under the guise of providing assistance, while actually positioning themselves to control or redirect wealth for their own benefit, rather than preserving it for appropriate family use and generational transfer. Successful professionals who move back into family homes claiming temporary financial difficulties while actually planning to establish legal residence that could support inheritance claims or property rights, often isolating elderly relatives from other family members, friends, and financial advisors who might question unusual interest in family assets or recognize signs of financial manipulation and exploitation. Most concerning were the family members who systematically isolated their elderly relatives from independent financial advisors, estate planning attorneys, and other professionals who might recognize financial abuse or provide objective guidance about wealth management and family financial relationships. These manipulative relatives would convince elderly family members that outside advisors were trying to steal their money, that financial professionals were charging excessive fees, and that only devoted family members could be trusted to properly manage complex financial situations, while actually planning to exploit that trust for personal financial gain. My marriage to Robert Thornfield had been a partnership built on shared commitment to building generational wealth, complementary expertise in investment management and estate planning, and dedication to preserving family prosperity while maintaining the values and relationships that gave wealth its meaning beyond just financial accumulation. Robert was a brilliant estate planning attorney who had immigrated from Scotland in 1955 and started with a small legal practice in downtown Chicago, gradually building an impressive client portfolio of wealthy families throughout the Midwest who needed sophisticated legal guidance for preserving their fortunes across multiple generations. Robert's legal philosophy was methodical and strategically brilliant. He identified emerging tax planning opportunities before other attorneys recognized their potential, developed relationships with trust and estate specialists throughout the country before other lawyers discovered their expertise, and created wealth preservation strategies that protected family assets while maintaining the family relationships and values that gave generational wealth its purpose and meaning beyond just financial accumulation. Robert had an exceptional understanding of estate planning complexities and the legal structures that could protect family wealth from taxes, creditors, and family disputes that often destroy generational prosperity. In 1978, he established the Thornfield Family Trust, using innovative legal structures that provided tax advantages while maintaining family control over investment decisions and distribution timing that would allow our wealth to grow and support multiple generations of family members. His commitment to sophisticated legal planning proved prescient. By 1995, the Thornfield Family Trust had become one of the most successful family wealth preservation structures in the Midwest, generating consistent returns while providing tax advantages and legal protections that preserved family assets through economic downturns, legal challenges, and family changes that could have threatened our financial security and legacy preservation. The trust structure attracted attention from estate planning professionals and wealthy families throughout the region, and Robert became a consultant for other attorneys trying to achieve similar wealth preservation results and legal protection for their clients' family fortunes. Over 30 years of careful legal planning and investment management, Robert and I had built a financial legacy that included the $200 million family trust, substantial real estate holdings throughout Chicago and the surrounding suburbs, investment portfolios that provided consistent income and growth, and business interests that generated additional revenue while supporting our philanthropic commitments and community involvement. Robert's approach to wealth management was based on the principle that sustainable family prosperity required building genuine relationships among family members based on mutual respect, shared values, and understanding that generational wealth carried responsibilities for family unity and community contribution rather than just providing individual financial benefit, without regard for family relationships or social obligations. He maintained reasonable distribution levels that allowed family members to live comfortably without developing entitlement attitudes, invested consistently in education and character development opportunities that prepared younger generations for wealth responsibility, and provided the kind of consistent family leadership that built loyalty and respect, spanning multiple generations, while preserving the values that gave our family wealth its meaning and purpose. One example of Robert's wealth management philosophy involved establishing education funds for all family members that provided full funding for college and graduate school expenses, but required maintaining academic performance standards and demonstrating character development through community service and family involvement. Family members who met these requirements received not only educational funding but also career development support and guidance that helped them build successful independent lives while remaining connected to family values and responsibilities. The education program not only supported individual family success but created strong bonds among family members who understood that their opportunities came with responsibilities for maintaining family relationships and contributing to family legacy preservation for future generations. Their success and continued family involvement created a positive cycle where family wealth supported individual achievement, while individual success strengthened family unity and generational wealth preservation. The family trust had reached $200 million in value by 2022, generating annual distributions of $8-12 million that supported family members throughout the Midwest, while funding charitable giving that benefited hospitals, universities, and community organizations throughout the region. Our family's financial success consistently maintained these distribution levels even during economic challenges, and our philanthropic commitments during prosperous periods often extended substantially beyond the minimum distribution requirements. But Robert was also a keen observer of human nature, who had noticed concerning patterns in some family members' approaches to trust fund benefits, family financial support, and respect for the elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements had created the prosperity that younger generations often took for granted, without understanding the effort and sacrifice required to build and preserve generational wealth. Margaret, our family wealth represents decades of careful planning and sacrifice, Robert had explained to me during one of our conversations about family legacy and ensuring that inherited wealth strengthened, rather than corrupted, family relationships and character development. But some family members seem to view trust distributions as automatic entitlements, rather than understanding that continued financial support requires maintaining the values and relationships that justify generational wealth preservation. When I watch younger relatives interact with family financial benefits, I see them treating trust fund distributions as guaranteed income, rather than understanding that family wealth requires responsibility, respect, and commitment to the values that created our prosperity. He continued with concern about family members who didn't appreciate the effort and decision-making required to maintain and distribute generational wealth appropriately. They don't realize that trust fund distributions represent active investment management and careful planning that could be modified based on family behavior and character development, or that their financial security depends on maintaining relationships and demonstrating the respect that justifies continued family financial support. Robert had noticed that some family members seemed more interested in maximizing their financial benefits than in maintaining family relationships or demonstrating appreciation for the elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements had created their comfortable circumstances. During family gatherings, certain relatives would ask detailed questions about inheritance timing and distribution amounts, while showing minimal interest in family history, elder care, or the responsibilities that came with inherited wealth. I'm concerned that some people view family wealth as an automatic inheritance rather than understanding that generational prosperity requires each generation to demonstrate the character and values that justify continued family financial support, Robert had observed during one family reunion, when several relatives spent more time discussing trust fund distributions than participating in family conversation or showing interest in elderly relatives' welfare and needs. Family wealth should strengthen relationships and support character development, not create entitlement attitudes that damage family unity and disrespect the people whose achievements created our prosperity. These observations proved to be prophetic when we had children and grandchildren who would grow up benefiting from family wealth, while sometimes failing to understand the effort and sacrifice required to create and preserve generational prosperity, or the respect and responsibility required to maintain family relationships that justified continued financial support and inheritance benefits. The stage was being set for a winter evening that would test whether my son's family understood that wealth came with responsibilities for family relationships and elder care, or whether they would demonstrate the selfishness and disrespect that would cost them everything they thought they had inherited and leave them facing spring without the financial security they had assumed would continue automatically regardless of their treatment of the elderly relative who controlled their financial future. But David and Jennifer had no idea that the woman they were preparing to abandon in a blizzard controlled the trust fund that had been financing their lifestyle for 15 years, or that their comfortable circumstances could disappear permanently based on a single evening's demonstration of their true character, when they believed no one with power over their financial future was watching their behavior. The winter storm that seemed like an inconvenient end to their holiday party would become the most expensive evening of their lives, and the coat they refused to provide would cost them everything they thought they owned when spring arrived, with financial consequences that would teach them the true meaning of family responsibility and respect for elderly relatives whose generosity they had been taking for granted. Looking back now with the clarity that comes from watching someone's true character emerge through their treatment of elderly relatives they consider burdensome, I can see that David and Jennifer's assumptions about my financial dependence weren't sudden judgments formed during that devastating winter evening. They were carefully cultivated beliefs based on their conviction that elderly mothers represented outdated obligations that successful modern couples had evolved beyond through their own professional achievements and contemporary lifestyle management. From the moment David first introduced Jennifer to our family during a casual Sunday dinner in March 2007, she demonstrated the kind of polite assessment that reveals someone's true attitudes about elderly relatives and their role in contemporary family dynamics. Jennifer had graduated from Northwestern University with a marketing degree, completed an internship at a prestigious advertising agency in downtown Chicago, and recently secured a position as marketing coordinator at Meridian Healthcare Solutions, a boutique consulting firm that specialized in what business publications called innovative healthcare marketing strategies for affluent demographic targeting. Jennifer's professional credentials were impressive on paper, and she carried herself with the confident poise of someone who believed formal education and corporate experience automatically qualified her as superior to elderly relatives who had built their success through different generational approaches and traditional business methods that contemporary professionals often viewed as outdated and inefficient compared to modern management techniques and technological solutions. But what struck me immediately about Jennifer's approach to family relationships and elderly relatives was her dismissive attitude toward any lifestyle choices that couldn't be traced to contemporary efficiency standards or current professional best practices. When she observed our family dynamics during that first Sunday dinner, her reactions revealed someone who viewed traditional approaches to elderly care and family financial support as inconvenient obligations, rather than understanding the complex relationships and responsibilities that connected family prosperity to elder respect and care. "Oh, you still live in this large house by yourself," she had commented while touring our family home in Lake Forest, her tone suggesting that elderly people living independently in substantial properties was charming but impractical compared to modern approaches to senior living that prioritized efficiency and cost management over family tradition and personal preference. Most families today have found that assisted living communities provide much more appropriate care and social opportunities for elderly relatives, while reducing the family burden of maintaining large properties that are difficult for older people to manage safely. "I've lived in this house for 43 years and raised my children here," I had replied, continuing to prepare dinner in the kitchen that had been the center of our family life for decades, and represented my connection to family memories and traditions that couldn't be replaced by institutional living arrangements designed for efficiency, rather than personal meaning and family continuity. "That's so traditional and sentimental," Jennifer had responded with the kind of enthusiasm that sounded appreciative but actually conveyed condescension, as if family tradition was a quaint concept that had value primarily as nostalgia, rather than representing important emotional connections and practical benefits that institutional care couldn't provide. "It must be nice to maintain those old family connections, even if modern senior living offers more practical advantages and professional care services." This exchange established the dynamic that would characterize Jennifer's relationship with my independence and family role throughout the 15 years leading up to the winter evening that would destroy her financial security. She consistently positioned herself as the educated professional who appreciated traditional family values for their emotional significance, while simultaneously making it clear that she considered modern approaches and institutional solutions superior in terms of efficiency, cost management, and practical elderly care that reduced family obligations and simplified contemporary lifestyle management. Jennifer's background had prepared her to view elderly relatives through the lens of corporate efficiency and contemporary family management, rather than understanding that traditional family structures often provided superior emotional support and practical benefits precisely because they prioritized family relationships and individual needs over standardized institutional care and cost reduction strategies. During subsequent family gatherings, Jennifer's comments about my living situation and family role revealed a pattern of subtle criticism disguised as professional concern and helpful suggestions. She would ask questions about my daily routines and household management that seemed caring but actually demonstrated her assumption that elderly independence needed improvement through contemporary services and institutional support that would reduce family involvement and simplify everyone's responsibilities. "Margaret, I'm curious about your daily routine and household management," she had said during a family dinner in November 2007, watching me manage the meal preparation and hosting duties that I had performed successfully for decades, without assistance or institutional support. "Have you ever considered exploring some of the contemporary senior services that could help with household maintenance and daily activities? Many families today have found that professional services can enhance elderly independence while reducing family concerns about safety and daily care management." "I've managed my household successfully for over 40 years, I had explained patiently, serving the dinner that I had prepared entirely independently, using the same organizational skills and physical capabilities that had allowed me to run a major investment firm, while maintaining family responsibilities and community commitments throughout my career. I have excellent health, strong family relationships, and the financial resources to maintain my independence and comfort without requiring institutional assistance or professional services that would reduce my control over my own living environment and daily decisions." "Oh, I didn't mean to suggest you needed institutional care," Jennifer had quickly clarified, apparently realizing that her suggestion might have sounded inappropriate or insulting. "I was thinking about professional services that could enhance your current independence while providing family peace of mind about safety and emergency preparedness for elderly relatives living alone in large properties." But her clarification actually revealed the deeper problem with her approach to elderly family members. Jennifer consistently focused on potential problems and safety concerns, rather than recognizing that successful independent living was evidence of continued capability and decision-making authority that deserved respect, rather than institutional intervention designed to reduce family obligations and transfer elderly care to professional services. Jennifer's attitude toward my independence reflected broader assumptions about elderly women and their role in contemporary family structures. To her, I represented a generation of elderly relatives whose independence created family obligations that modern couples should minimize through professional services and institutional solutions, rather than maintaining traditional family support systems and respecting elderly relatives' preferences for maintaining their established lifestyles and living arrangements. She consistently treated my independence as a potential liability rather than recognizing it as evidence of continued capability and financial security that actually reduced family obligations by eliminating the need for elderly care support and assistance. During family gatherings, she would make comments about elderly safety and institutional care options, while framing her concerns as family responsibility and caring attention, rather than demonstrating understanding that my independence was maintained through substantial financial resources and continued professional capability that made institutional care unnecessary and inappropriate. "Margaret, have you given any thought to emergency preparedness and safety planning for living alone in such a large property?" she had asked during a Christmas dinner in 2008, apparently assuming that elderly people living independently required special safety measures and emergency protocols that younger people didn't need to consider for their own living situations. "I have comprehensive security systems, emergency contacts, and financial resources that provide much better safety and emergency preparedness than most people maintain regardless of their age," I had explained, testing whether Jennifer understood that financial security and professional planning often provided better safety and emergency preparedness than institutional care or family supervision that assumed elderly people were inherently less capable of managing their own welfare and security needs. "But surely family support and professional services could enhance your current safety measures while providing additional peace of mind for everyone," Jennifer had persisted with obvious confidence that contemporary family management required minimizing elderly relatives' independence through institutional support and professional services that reduced family obligations while ensuring appropriate care and safety for elderly family members. Her insistence on improving my independence revealed that Jennifer viewed my lifestyle as an inefficient arrangement that required professional intervention and family management, rather than understanding that financial security and continued capability allowed me to maintain independence that was actually superior to institutional alternatives in terms of personal comfort, family connection, and practical daily management. Jennifer's approach to my independence during family visits further demonstrated her assumptions about the limitations of elderly living and the superiority of contemporary institutional services and professional elderly care management. She would examine my household organization and daily routines with the concerned attention of someone evaluating a potential problem situation, making comments that revealed her belief that elderly independence required external support and professional monitoring to ensure safety and appropriate care. "This is such a beautiful traditional home," she had commented during a family gathering in early 2009, examining my household organization and management systems with the careful concern of someone assessing an elderly relative's capability rather than recognizing successful independent living that demonstrated continued competence and financial security. It must be challenging to maintain such a large property and manage all the household responsibilities without professional assistance or family support services. Traditional household management often provides better results than contemporary services when you have the financial resources and organizational skills to maintain high standards, I had replied, watching her evaluate my living situation with the analytical approach of someone who believed elderly relatives required external assessment and professional intervention, rather than recognizing that successful independence was evidence of continued capability and decision-making authority. "I have household staff, professional maintenance services, and financial resources that allow me to maintain my independence, while ensuring that my home and daily routine meet my standards for comfort and efficiency." Jennifer consistently framed our conversations about independence in terms of safety concerns and potential improvements, rather than understanding that financial security often provided better living arrangements and daily management than institutional care or professional elderly services that prioritized cost management and standardized care over individual preferences and personal comfort. But the most revealing aspect of Jennifer's attitude toward my independence was her assumption that my lifestyle and household management were family obligations that created responsibilities for younger relatives, rather than understanding that financial independence actually reduced family obligations by eliminating the need for elderly care support and assistance that many families required when elderly relatives lacked the resources to maintain their own independence and comfort. During a family gathering in March 2009, Jennifer had casually mentioned that she was researching contemporary approaches to elderly family support and modern solutions for helping elderly relatives maintain safety and appropriate care while reducing family stress and obligation management. When pressed for details, she explained that she was exploring institutional care options and professional services that could enhance elderly independence while providing family peace of mind about safety and daily care management. "I'm working on developing a comprehensive elderly care plan that addresses safety concerns while maintaining independence through professional support services and family coordination," she had explained with obvious pride in her analytical approach to family management and elderly care planning. "Instead of traditional family obligation approaches, I'm researching contemporary solutions that provide appropriate care while reducing family stress and allowing everyone to maintain their own lifestyle priorities." "What specific safety concerns or care needs are you addressing with this planning?" I had asked, curious about whether her research had included understanding the financial resources and professional capabilities that actually determined elderly care needs and independence sustainability, rather than simply assuming that elderly relatives required external intervention and family management regardless of their individual circumstances and financial security. "I've been analyzing general elderly care principles and identifying potential risk factors that could affect independent living safety and family obligation management," Jennifer had replied with the confident terminology of someone who believed that elderly care could be standardized through professional assessment and institutional solutions, rather than understanding that individual circumstances and financial resources often determined appropriate care approaches and independent sustainability. But her explanation revealed that she was treating elderly care as a theoretical problem to be solved through professional services and institutional solutions, rather than understanding that my specific situation involved financial security and continued capability that made contemporary elderly care planning unnecessary and inappropriate for my particular circumstances and lifestyle preferences. Jennifer's corporate position at Meridian Healthcare Solutions had reinforced her assumptions about the superiority of professional services and institutional solutions over traditional family approaches to elderly care and support. The company specialized in what its management called optimized healthcare solutions that helped families manage elderly care obligations through professional services and institutional arrangements that reduced family involvement while ensuring appropriate care and safety monitoring for elderly relatives. Working in this environment had taught Jennifer to view elderly relatives as potential care management challenges, rather than understanding that financial security and continued capability often eliminated the need for professional intervention and institutional solutions that were designed for elderly people who lacked the resources to maintain their own independence and decision-making authority. Our company philosophy is about helping families navigate elderly care challenges through professional solutions that optimize safety and care quality while minimizing family stress and obligation management, Jennifer had explained when describing her work at Meridian Healthcare Solutions during a family dinner conversation. We help families identify appropriate institutional care and professional services that provide better elderly support than traditional family obligation approaches, while allowing younger family members to maintain their own lifestyle priorities and professional commitments. But this philosophy actually represented a fundamental misunderstanding of family wealth and elderly independence, treating financial security and continued capability as problems to be managed through institutional intervention, rather than recognizing that substantial resources often provided superior independence and comfort, compared to professional elderly care services designed for people who lacked the financial means to maintain their own living preferences and decision-making authority. Jennifer's confidence about her understanding of elderly care and family management had grown throughout her first few years of marriage to David, particularly as she gained more responsibility at Meridian Healthcare Solutions, and received positive feedback from clients who appreciated professional solutions that reduced family obligations and simplified elderly care management through institutional arrangements and professional services. Her success with "optimized elderly care solutions" had convinced Jennifer that she understood family management principles well enough to evaluate and improve traditional approaches to elderly relatives and family support through contemporary professional services and institutional solutions that prioritized efficiency and cost management over individual preferences and family relationship maintenance. She began speaking about elderly care and family obligations with the authority of someone who believed that analyzing and systematizing family relationships had given her expertise equivalent to decades of family experience and individual relationship management that couldn't be replaced through professional services and institutional care designed for standardized, rather than individual approaches to elderly support and independence. The thing about traditional family approaches to elderly care is that they often achieve adequate results through inefficient methods that can be optimized without losing the essential family connection and support, Jennifer had explained during a conversation about elderly care and contemporary family management trends. When you understand the principles behind family obligations, you can preserve the important emotional elements while eliminating unnecessary family stress and improving care quality through professional services and institutional support. This attitude revealed Jennifer's fundamental misunderstanding of family relationships and elderly care, which achieved their results not despite traditional approaches but because of them. Family connections and individual attention had been developed through generations of experience, specifically because they produced superior emotional support and practical care, and attempting to, optimize them usually eliminated the precise elements that created authentic family relationships and appropriate elderly support. But Jennifer's professional success and growing confidence in her family management abilities had created a sense of authority that extended beyond her actual expertise, particularly in her interactions with elderly relatives whose independence she viewed through the lens of her professional training and contemporary elderly care industry experience. By the spring of 2010, Jennifer had established herself as the family's unofficial elderly care expert, offering suggestions about safety planning for family gatherings, commenting on traditional family approaches with the authority of professional experience, and positioning herself as the bridge between our family's traditional elderly care and contemporary professional services that valued efficiency and cost management over individual preferences and family relationship preservation. I think it would be wonderful if Margaret could benefit from some of the contemporary elderly care services that would enhance her current independence while providing family peace of mind, Jennifer had suggested during a family conversation about elderly care and family responsibility. These professional services have such sophisticated approaches to elderly support that they could really improve traditional family care while reducing family stress and obligation management. Traditional family support is usually based on individual relationships and personal preferences rather than standardized professional services, I had replied, testing whether Jennifer understood the difference between family relationships and institutional care that treated elderly people as problems to be managed, rather than individuals with specific preferences and financial resources that determined appropriate care approaches. "Oh, I didn't mean replacing family relationships," Jennifer had clarified quickly, apparently realizing that her suggestion might have sounded inappropriate or insensitive to family connections. "I was thinking more about professional enhancement and safety optimization that could support traditional family care, while providing contemporary services that improve elderly independence and family peace of mind." But her clarification actually revealed that she didn't understand the difference between family relationships based on individual connection and professional services designed to replace family involvement with institutional care that prioritize standardized approaches over personal preferences and individual circumstances that determined appropriate elderly support and independence management. Jennifer's growing confidence in her elderly care expertise and her assumptions about family management had set the stage for the winter evening that would reveal her true character and cost her everything she thought she had inherited from the family wealth that she assumed was automatic inheritance. Rather than understanding that continued financial support required maintaining family relationships and demonstrating respect for elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements had created the prosperity that younger generations often took for granted. The modest suburban lifestyle that David and I maintained during family gatherings had become, in Jennifer's mind, evidence of elderly dependence and traditional family obligations that needed improvement through contemporary professional services and institutional solutions rather than understanding that our apparent simplicity concealed sophisticated financial management and investment strategies that provided security and independence far superior to institutional elderly care or professional services designed for people who lacked substantial financial resources. Jennifer had no idea that the woman whose independence she planned to optimize through professional elderly care services controlled the trust fund that had been financing her luxury lifestyle, or that her comfortable circumstances could disappear permanently based on her treatment of the elderly relative whose financial generosity she had been taking for granted while planning to reduce her family obligations through institutional care and professional services. The family conversations that seemed like opportunities to demonstrate her elderly care expertise would become evidence of her fundamental misunderstanding about family wealth and the respect required to maintain financial support from elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements had created the prosperity that enabled younger family members to live comfortably while sometimes failing to understand the source of their financial security. David's attitude toward my independence was less systematic than Jennifer's but equally problematic in terms of his assumptions about elderly obligations and family financial relationships. As my son, David had grown up benefiting from family wealth but had never fully understood the effort and expertise required to build and maintain generational prosperity, or the ongoing decision-making and relationship management that determined trust fund distributions and family financial support. David worked as a regional sales manager for Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, earning $95,000 annually through commission-based sales of prescription medications to healthcare providers throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. His job required maintaining relationships with doctors, hospital administrators, and pharmacy managers who made purchasing decisions about prescription drug inventory and patient treatment recommendations that affected pharmaceutical company sales and revenue generation. David's professional success had been substantial within his field, and he had received recognition for exceeding sales targets and maintaining client relationships that generated consistent revenue growth for his pharmaceutical company. His income placed him in the upper middle class for his age group and educational background, and he took pride in his professional achievements and the lifestyle that his career success had provided for his family. But David's financial perspective had been shaped by his assumption that his comfortable lifestyle was the natural result of his own professional success, combined with normal family inheritance, rather than understanding that his actual standard of living exceeded his earned income by substantial amounts through trust fund distributions and family financial support that he had received consistently since his marriage to Jennifer. The $2.8 million house in Lake Forest that David considered evidence of his professional success had been purchased with a $400,000 down payment provided by the family trust, followed by mortgage assistance during difficult sales years and property tax support that reduced his housing costs by approximately $60,000 annually compared to the actual cost of maintaining such an expensive property on his pharmaceutical sales income alone. David's children's private school education at Ravenswood Academy, costing $45,000 per year for each child, was funded entirely through trust distributions that David assumed were normal family education support rather than understanding that private school tuition represented a substantial financial commitment that exceeded his discretionary income and required ongoing family wealth management and distribution decisions. The family vacations, luxury vehicles, country club membership, and lifestyle expenses that David considered normal middle-class family spending actually cost approximately $180,000 annually above his pharmaceutical sales income, all funded through trust distributions that were presented as family gifts and inheritance advances rather than discretionary financial support that could be modified or eliminated based on family relationships and behavior toward elderly relatives. But David had gradually developed a sense of entitlement about these financial benefits that extended to his attitude toward family obligations and elderly care responsibilities. He began viewing my independence and household management as potential family obligations that could interfere with his own lifestyle priorities and professional commitments, rather than understanding that my financial independence actually reduced family obligations by eliminating the need for elderly care support and assistance. "Mom, I worry about you living alone in that big house," David had said during a family conversation in late 2010, apparently assuming that elderly people living independently created family obligations and safety concerns that younger relatives needed to manage through increased involvement or alternative living arrangements. Jennifer and I have been discussing some contemporary senior living options that might provide better safety and social opportunities, while reducing our concerns about your daily management and emergency preparedness. "I live independently because I have the financial resources and personal capability to maintain my own household and lifestyle preferences," I had replied, testing whether David understood that financial security often provided better living arrangements than institutional care or family supervision designed for elderly people who lacked the resources to maintain their own independence and decision-making authority. "But we worry about emergencies and daily safety in such a large property," David had continued, with obvious assumption that elderly relatives required family concern and intervention regardless of their individual circumstances and financial security. "Contemporary senior communities provide professional safety monitoring and emergency response that could give everyone peace of mind while maintaining your independence." His suggestion revealed that David viewed my independence as a family obligation, rather than recognizing that financial security and continued capability actually reduced family responsibilities by eliminating the need for elderly care support and supervision that many families required when elderly relatives lacked substantial resources and professional management capabilities. David's assumptions about elderly care and family obligations had been reinforced by Jennifer's professional expertise and contemporary approaches to family management that prioritized efficiency and institutional solutions over traditional family relationships and individual preferences that required ongoing personal attention and family involvement. Working together, David and Jennifer had developed a comprehensive perspective on elderly family management that treated my independence as a potential problem to be solved through professional services and institutional care rather than understanding that financial security and continued capability provided superior living arrangements and daily management compared to standardized elderly care designed for people with different circumstances and resources. "We've been researching some excellent senior living communities that provide independent living with professional support services," Jennifer had explained during a family dinner in early 2011, presenting their elderly care planning as comprehensive family management that demonstrated caring attention rather than revealing their fundamental misunderstanding about my financial circumstances and individual preferences. These communities offer beautiful apartments, social activities, and safety monitoring while maintaining independence and reducing family concerns about daily care management. "What specific daily care management or safety concerns are you addressing with this planning?" I had asked directly, curious about whether their research had included understanding my actual circumstances and financial resources, rather than simply assuming that elderly relatives required institutional care and professional services regardless of their individual capability and security arrangements. "We're thinking about general elderly safety and family peace of mind," David had replied with diplomatic evasion that avoided acknowledging that their elderly care planning was based on assumptions rather than actual assessment of my specific circumstances and needs. "We want to make sure you have appropriate support and safety measures while maintaining your independence and comfort." But their explanation didn't address why they assumed I needed institutional support or professional safety monitoring, when my current living arrangement provided superior comfort, security, and independence compared to senior living communities designed for elderly people with different financial resources and lifestyle preferences. Their elderly care planning revealed that David and Jennifer viewed my independence through theoretical elderly care principles, rather than understanding my specific circumstances and financial security that made institutional care unnecessary and inappropriate for my particular situation and lifestyle preferences. By 2012, David and Jennifer had established a pattern of treating my independence as a family management challenge that required their ongoing attention and eventual solution through professional services and institutional care that would reduce their family obligations while ensuring appropriate elderly support and safety monitoring. They consistently framed conversations about my living situation in terms of family responsibility and caring concern, rather than acknowledging that their elderly care planning was designed to reduce their own obligations and simplify their family management through institutional solutions that transferred elderly care to professional services, rather than maintaining traditional family relationships and support systems. The family wealth that had been supporting their comfortable lifestyle for 5 years had created a sense of financial security that allowed David and Jennifer to focus on optimizing their family obligations and elderly care responsibilities through contemporary solutions that prioritized their own convenience, while presenting their planning as appropriate family management and caring attention to elderly relatives' welfare and safety needs. But David and Jennifer had no idea that the elderly relative whose independence they were planning to optimize through institutional care actually controlled the trust fund that had been financing their lifestyle since their marriage, or that their comfortable circumstances could disappear permanently if their elderly care planning revealed character flaws and family relationship problems that violated the respect and family unity required to maintain continued financial support and inheritance benefits. The winter evening that seemed like an opportunity to implement their elderly care planning and demonstrate their family management expertise would become the most expensive demonstration of their true priorities when they discovered that some elderly relatives possess the financial power to determine whether younger family members maintain their comfortable lifestyle or face spring without the financial security they had assumed would continue automatically regardless of their treatment of the elderly family members whose lifetime achievements had created their prosperity and comfort. While David and Jennifer were researching, quote, contemporary senior living solutions and planning to optimize my elderly care management, they had absolutely no idea that they were discussing the financial future of someone whose investment decisions could eliminate their comfortable lifestyle with a single signature on trust fund modification documents. The woman they viewed as an aging burden whose independence needed professional management was actually Margaret Thornfield, the hidden architect behind the most sophisticated wealth preservation network in the Midwest, whose financial influence could launch families to generational prosperity or reduce them to middle-class struggle based on their treatment of elderly relatives and respect for family relationships. What David and Jennifer didn't know, and what they had never bothered to investigate despite 15 years of receiving substantial financial benefits, was that the modest lifestyle I maintained during family gatherings was just one aspect of a financial empire worth over $400 million in combined assets. The elderly independence that Jennifer wanted to optimize through institutional care was actually supported by investment income that exceeded most families' annual earnings, generated through financial strategies and wealth management expertise that controlled the prosperity of hundreds of families throughout the Great Lakes region. The comfortable suburban home, where they observed my potentially unsafe elderly living situation, wasn't just a family residence that required professional safety monitoring. It was the private headquarters of my continued involvement in investment management and wealth preservation activities that generated millions of dollars in annual returns, while maintaining the family trust distributions that had been financing their luxury lifestyle since their marriage in 2007. The daily routines that Jennifer analyzed for elderly care optimization opportunities actually included managing investment portfolios worth over $50 million, coordinating with wealth management firms and private banks throughout Chicago and the surrounding region, and making financial decisions that affected the economic security of dozens of families who depended on Thornfield Capital Management's expertise for preserving and growing their generational wealth across multiple decades of economic changes and market volatility. Every aspect of my seemingly simple elderly routine represented continued professional activity and financial influence that David and Jennifer's contemporary elderly care planning completely failed to recognize or understand. The morning leisure time that they assumed could be enhanced through senior community social activities actually involved reviewing investment reports and market analysis that informed daily trading decisions worth millions of dollars in portfolio adjustments and strategic asset allocation changes. The afternoon household management that Jennifer believed could be optimized through professional services actually included conference calls with investment advisors, estate planning attorneys, and wealth preservation specialists who coordinated the complex financial strategies that maintained our family trust's growth while supporting the distribution schedules that had been providing David and Jennifer's supplemental income for 15 years. The evening safety concerns that David worried about regarding my independent living actually occurred during the time when I reviewed trust fund performance reports, evaluated distribution requests from family members, and made decisions about inheritance planning and family financial support that could dramatically change the economic circumstances of relatives whose behavior and character demonstrated whether they deserved continued access to family wealth and generational prosperity. But beyond the daily investment management activities, what David and Jennifer completely failed to understand was the scope of financial control and industry influence that my retirement actually represented. The elderly woman whose independence they wanted to manage through institutional care actually maintained active leadership roles in investment firms, charitable foundations, and wealth management organizations that controlled billions of dollars in assets and determined the financial success of families, businesses, and community organizations throughout the Midwest. Thornfield Capital Management had never actually ceased operations when Robert and I officially retired in 2005. It had simply transitioned to a more selective client focus and private wealth management approach that maintained our influence while reducing the public profile and daily operational demands that had characterized our earlier career phases. The firm continued managing $8 billion in client assets through a network of carefully selected investment advisors and wealth preservation specialists who operated under our strategic guidance and financial oversight. Our client portfolio included some of the most successful families in the Midwest, ranging from technology entrepreneurs whose startup investments had generated hundreds of millions in returns, to manufacturing dynasties whose family businesses had been preserved and expanded through multiple generations of economic changes, to philanthropic foundations whose charitable giving supported hospitals, universities, and community organizations throughout the Great Lakes region. The Henderson Manufacturing Company that we had saved during the 2008 financial crisis had grown into one of the largest privately held industrial corporations in the Midwest, employing over 2,000 people and generating annual revenues exceeding $800 million. The Henderson family continued relying on Thornfield Capital Management for investment strategy and wealth preservation planning that had allowed them to expand their business operations while increasing their charitable giving to over $15 million annually, supporting educational institutions and community development programs throughout Wisconsin and Illinois. The Rockwell Family Foundation that we had restructured during their governance crisis had become one of the most influential philanthropic organizations in Michigan, distributing over $50 million annually to education, healthcare, and community development initiatives that had transformed dozens of communities and supported hundreds of nonprofit organizations throughout the Detroit metropolitan area and rural Michigan communities that had been devastated by manufacturing industry changes. These successful client relationships provided Thornfield Capital Management with continued influence over investment markets, charitable giving patterns, and wealth preservation strategies that affected thousands of families and hundreds of organizations throughout the region. Our recommendations influenced which investment opportunities received funding, which charitable organizations received major philanthropic support, and which wealth management approaches were adopted by other firms serving high-net-worth clients throughout the Great Lakes Economic Corridor. But our influence extended beyond direct client services to comprehensive involvement in the financial institutions and professional organizations that controlled wealth management and investment services throughout the Midwest. Major banks including J.P. Morgan Chase, Northern Trust, and Harris Bank regularly consulted with our firm about investment strategies, estate planning approaches, and wealth preservation techniques that informed their services to affluent clients and family office operations. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Chicago Board of Trade maintained ongoing relationships with Thornfield Capital Management for market analysis and investment strategy guidance that influenced trading patterns and commodity pricing throughout the agricultural and industrial sectors that formed the foundation of Midwest economic activity. Our research and strategic recommendations affected investment decisions worth billions of dollars and influenced economic development patterns throughout the region. Investment firms and wealth management companies throughout Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Indiana used Thornfield Capital Management's research and strategic analysis to inform their own client services and investment recommendations. Our quarterly wealth preservation reports were distributed to over 500 investment advisors and estate planning attorneys who relied on our expertise to guide their services to high-net-worth families and business owners throughout the region. The University of Chicago Graduate School of Business and Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management regularly invited me to participate in executive education programs and wealth management seminars that trained the next generation of investment advisors and estate planning specialists. My lectures on generational wealth preservation and family financial dynamics influenced hundreds of professionals who would go on to manage billions of dollars in family assets and charitable foundation resources throughout their careers. But perhaps most significantly, the Illinois State Investment Board and Chicago Municipal Pension Fund relied on Thornfield Capital Management for strategic guidance about public investment policies and retirement fund management that affected the financial security of thousands of government employees and retirees throughout the state. Our recommendations influenced investment policies that managed over $200 billion in public assets and determined the retirement security of teachers, police officers, firefighters, and government workers throughout Illinois. David and Jennifer's comfortable lifestyle that they attributed to his pharmaceutical sales success was actually supported by the smallest possible distributions from a trust fund whose value and income generation exceeded their understanding by orders of magnitude. The $8 to $12 million in annual trust distributions that supported our family members represented less than 4% of the trust's actual income generation, with the remainder being reinvested for continued growth and allocated to charitable giving that supported dozens of organizations throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. Their $2.8 million house in Lake Forest, which they considered evidence of David's professional achievement, was actually a modest property compared to the real estate portfolio that the family trust controlled throughout the Chicago suburbs, downtown commercial district, and resort communities in Wisconsin and Michigan. The trust owned over $150 million in real estate assets, including office buildings that housed major law firms and investment companies, retail properties that anchored suburban shopping districts, and vacation properties that provided family recreational opportunities while generating substantial rental income from affluent tenants who paid premium prices for luxury accommodations. The private school education that Emma and Jacob received at Ravenswood Academy was actually funded by the same charitable foundation grants that supported dozens of other educational institutions throughout the region. The Thornfield Education Foundation, established with trust fund resources in 1995, provided over $8 million annually in educational grants that supported private schools, university scholarships, and educational research programs that enhanced learning opportunities for thousands of students throughout the Midwest. Ravenswood Academy itself received annual grants of $250,000 from the Thornfield Education Foundation to support their scholarship programs and educational excellence initiatives, meaning that David and Jennifer's children were attending a school that was partially funded by the same family wealth that they assumed was simply providing their tuition payments, rather than understanding the comprehensive educational philanthropy that their access to quality education represented. But the most ironic aspect of David and Jennifer's assumptions about my financial circumstances was that they were actually benefiting from investment strategies and wealth management decisions that I continued making on a daily basis while they planned to optimize my independence through institutional care that would have eliminated my ability to maintain the professional activities and financial oversight that generated their comfortable lifestyle and financial security. The trust fund distributions that had supported their lifestyle for 15 years weren't automatic inheritance payments that would continue regardless of family relationships and behavior. They were discretionary benefits that required ongoing decision-making about family financial support based on character assessment, respect levels, and demonstration of the values that justified continued access to generational wealth and family prosperity. Every month I reviewed detailed reports about family members' financial needs, lifestyle choices, and behavior patterns that inform decisions about trust distributions and family financial support. These evaluations included assessment of family relationships, respect for elderly relatives, character development, and demonstration of the responsibility and values that determined whether continued financial support was appropriate and beneficial for both individual family members and overall family unity and legacy preservation. David's pharmaceutical sales income of $95,000 annually provided a comfortable middle-class lifestyle that could support mortgage payments on a $400,000 house, public school education for his children, modest vacation travel, and basic family expenses without any supplemental financial support. The additional $180,000 in annual trust distributions that elevated his family's lifestyle to upper-class luxury was discretionary support that could be modified or eliminated based on family behavior and character assessment that demonstrated whether continued financial benefits were justified and appropriate. Jennifer's decision to remain unemployed since their marriage had been possible only because trust fund distributions provided sufficient supplemental income to support their luxury lifestyle without requiring dual professional incomes that most families needed to maintain similar living standards and educational opportunities for their children. Her ability to focus on elderly care optimization and family management projects was actually funded by the generational wealth that she was planning to optimize through institutional care and professional services. The children's private school education, extensive extracurricular activities, college preparation programs, and Ivy League university planning were all financed through trust fund distributions that exceeded the educational funding that most families could provide regardless of their professional success and income levels. Emma and Jacob's educational opportunities represented access to elite academic and social networks that would provide lifetime advantages and career opportunities worth millions of dollars in enhanced earning potential and professional connections. But all of these financial benefits depended on maintaining family relationships and demonstrating the character and values that justified continued access to generational wealth and family financial support. The trust fund documents that Robert and I had established included specific provisions for modifying or eliminating distributions based on family behavior, character assessment, and respect for elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements had created the prosperity that younger generations often took for granted. The legal structure of the Thornfield Family Trust provided me with complete discretionary authority over distribution amounts, timing, and recipient eligibility, based on ongoing evaluation of family members' character, behavior, and demonstration of the values that justified continued financial support and inheritance benefits. Trust fund distributions could be reduced, eliminated, or redirected to other family members or charitable organizations based on individual behavior and family relationship management that respected the elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements had created the family wealth. More significantly, the trust documents included provisions for complete elimination of inheritance benefits for family members whose behavior demonstrated disrespect for elderly relatives, failure to maintain family relationships, or character flaws that violated the values and principles that Robert and I had established as requirements for continued access to family wealth and generational prosperity. David and Jennifer's assumptions about their financial security were based on their belief that trust fund benefits were automatic inheritance rights, rather than understanding that their comfortable lifestyle depended on ongoing decision-making and evaluation processes that could dramatically change their economic circumstances based on their treatment of elderly relatives and demonstration of family responsibility and character development. The winter evening that they were planning to use for implementing their elderly care optimization would actually become the ultimate test of their character and family values, determining whether they understood that generational wealth required maintaining respectful relationships and family unity, or whether they would demonstrate the selfishness and disrespect that would justify eliminating their access to the financial benefits they had been taking for granted for 15 years. But beyond the trust fund management and family financial oversight, David and Jennifer had no idea about the broader network of professional relationships and industry influence that their elderly care planning could potentially disrupt through institutional care arrangements that would have eliminated my ability to maintain the business activities and professional connections that generated substantial income and investment opportunities for dozens of families throughout the Midwest. The safety concerns that they worried about regarding my independent living actually occurred during evening hours when I participated in conference calls with investment partners in New York, London, and Hong Kong, who coordinated international investment opportunities and currency trading strategies that generated millions of dollars in returns for client portfolios managed through Thornfield Capital Management's global investment network. The social isolation that Jennifer wanted to address through senior community activities would have eliminated my participation in exclusive investment clubs and wealth management organizations that provided access to investment opportunities unavailable to individual investors or smaller wealth management firms. These professional networks generated preferential access to private equity investments, real estate development projects, and business acquisition opportunities that enhanced client portfolio returns while providing substantial fees and profit-sharing arrangements for Thornfield Capital Management. The Chicago Economic Club, where I maintained membership and regular participation, provided access to investment opportunities and business development projects that affected economic development throughout the Midwest region. My involvement in club committees and strategic planning groups influenced investment policies and business development initiatives that created thousands of jobs and generated billions of dollars in economic activity throughout Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. The Great Lakes Wealth Management Association, where I served on the board of directors, coordinated investment strategies and wealth preservation techniques among the region's most successful investment firms and family offices. Our quarterly meetings and annual conferences influenced investment policies and wealth management approaches that affected over $500 billion in assets managed for high net worth families throughout the Great Lakes Economic Corridor. My continued participation in these professional organizations and investment networks was essential for maintaining Thornfield Capital Management's industry influence and client service capabilities that generated the investment returns and wealth preservation results that supported not only our family trust but also the financial security of hundreds of other families who depended on our expertise and professional connections for preserving and growing their generational wealth. The institutional care that David and Jennifer were planning would have eliminated my ability to maintain these professional relationships and business activities, potentially reducing our investment capabilities and client service quality, while threatening the financial security of dozens of families who relied on Thornfield Capital Management for investment management and wealth preservation services that required ongoing professional involvement and industry networking. But David and Jennifer's elderly care planning was based on assumptions about standard elderly care needs, rather than understanding the unique circumstances and professional requirements that made institutional care completely inappropriate for my specific situation and continued business activities. They had never investigated the source of their financial benefits or understood the professional activities that generated their comfortable lifestyle and family financial security. Their research into senior living communities and professional elderly care services was conducted without any consultation with me about my preferences, circumstances, or continued professional activities that required maintaining independent living arrangements and flexible scheduling that institutional care could not accommodate without eliminating essential business activities and professional responsibilities. The family peace of mind that they sought through institutional care planning would actually have created financial disaster for multiple families and eliminated the investment income and professional activities that generated their own comfortable lifestyle and financial security. Their elderly care optimization would have optimized away the source of their prosperity, while creating family financial crisis that would have affected not only our immediate family, but also dozens of other families who depended on Thornfield Capital Management's continued operation and professional excellence. The winter evening that seemed like an opportunity to demonstrate their caring family management and implement their elderly care planning would become the moment when David and Jennifer discovered that some elderly relatives possess professional responsibilities and financial influence that make institutional care planning not only inappropriate but potentially devastating for the families who depend on continued independent living and professional activity for their economic security and financial prosperity. The modest elderly independence that they wanted to optimize through professional services actually represented the operational foundation for a financial empire that controlled their economic future and could determine whether their comfortable lifestyle continued or disappeared permanently, based on their understanding of family responsibility and respect for the elderly relatives whose continued professional excellence and business activity generated the prosperity that enabled younger family members to live in luxury while sometimes failing to understand the source and requirements of their financial security. The woman they planned to relocate to institutional care for safety optimization controlled enough wealth and influence to eliminate their financial benefits permanently, while their assumptions about elderly care needs revealed character flaws and family relationship problems that violated the respect and family unity required to maintain access to generational wealth and trust fund distributions that had been supporting their lifestyle since their marriage 15 years earlier. The stage was set for David and Jennifer to discover that elderly care planning required understanding individual circumstances and professional requirements rather than applying standardized institutional solutions, and that family wealth came with obligations for maintaining respectful relationships and demonstrating character that justified continued financial support from elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements and continued professional excellence created the prosperity that younger generations often assumed was automatic inheritance rather than discretionary benefits that could be eliminated based on. The first clear indication that David and Jennifer viewed my independence as a burden to be managed rather than respecting my autonomy and understanding the source of their financial security came during Thanksgiving dinner in November 2022. just 1 month before the winter evening that would destroy their comfortable lifestyle forever. What initially seemed like caring family concern about elderly safety gradually revealed itself as systematic planning to eliminate my independence through institutional care that would have disrupted the professional activities and business relationships that generated their luxury lifestyle and trust fund distributions. During the Thanksgiving gathering at their Lake Forest home, David and Jennifer unveiled what they called their, quote, comprehensive elderly care plan that they had been developing for over a year without any consultation with me about my preferences, circumstances, or the professional activities that required maintaining independent living arrangements and flexible scheduling that institutional care could never accommodate. Mom, Jennifer and I have been working with some excellent senior care consultants to develop a safety and wellness plan that would give everyone peace of mind while maintaining your independence, David announced during dinner, producing a detailed presentation folder that contained brochures for luxury senior living communities, professional care service options, and what they described as, quote, contemporary approaches to family elderly care management. Their presentation revealed months of research and planning that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of elderly care marketing and institutional services, while showing complete ignorance about my actual circumstances, financial resources, and continued professional responsibilities that made their entire elderly care optimization completely inappropriate and potentially devastating for multiple families who depended on my continued business activities. We've identified 3 premier senior living communities that provide independent living with comprehensive safety monitoring and professional care services, Jennifer explained with obvious pride in their research and planning efforts. These communities offer beautiful apartments, gourmet dining, social activities, and 24/7 healthcare support, while maintaining independence and dignity for elderly residents who want security without sacrificing their autonomy. But their presentation focused exclusively on institutional benefits and safety features, while completely ignoring the professional activities and business responsibilities that required maintaining my current living arrangements and independent scheduling. They had researched elderly care solutions without ever investigating whether I actually needed institutional care, or understanding the circumstances that made their planning completely inappropriate for my specific situation. What specific safety concerns or care needs are you addressing with this institutional care planning? I asked directly, testing whether their research had included any assessment of my actual circumstances and requirements, rather than simply applying standardized elderly care solutions to a situation they had never bothered to understand. We're focusing on preventative care and safety optimization, David replied with diplomatic language that avoided acknowledging that their elderly care planning was based on assumptions rather than actual evaluation of my health, capability, or living situation. These communities provide professional monitoring and emergency response that would eliminate family concerns about daily safety and healthcare management. But what daily safety or healthcare management concerns require professional monitoring? I pressed, curious about whether they could identify any specific problems that justified institutional care, rather than simply assuming that elderly people automatically needed professional supervision regardless of their individual circumstances and capabilities. Well, living alone in such a large property creates inherent safety risks, Jennifer responded with the confident authority of someone who believed that elderly independence automatically created problems that required professional solutions. These communities eliminate those risks while providing social opportunities and professional care that enhance quality of life for elderly residents. Their explanation revealed that they viewed my independence as inherently problematic rather than understanding that financial security and continued capability provided superior living arrangements compared to institutional care designed for elderly people with different circumstances and needs. But the most concerning aspect of their elderly care presentation was their assumption that my living situation and daily routine were family decisions that they could optimize through institutional care planning without consulting me about my preferences or understanding the professional activities that made their institutional care suggestions completely inappropriate and potentially destructive. We've arranged for consultation visits with these senior communities so you can see the beautiful facilities and meet with their care coordinators, David announced, as if institutional care visits were inevitable, rather than understanding that their elderly care planning required my consent and agreement, rather than family decision-making that treated my independence as a problem to be solved through professional services. Why are you arranging institutional care consultations without discussing whether I'm interested in changing my living situation? I asked, testing whether they understood that elderly care decisions required individual consent and preference rather than family management that assumed elderly relatives needed guidance and direction from younger family members. "We're just exploring options and gathering information," Jennifer clarified quickly, apparently realizing that their presentation might sound presumptuous or controlling. "We want to make sure you have access to the best possible care and safety options while maintaining your independence and comfort." But their exploration had involved months of research and planning without any consultation with me, suggesting that they viewed elderly care as a family management issue, rather than individual decision-making that required respecting my preferences and understanding my specific circumstances and requirements. The progression of their elderly care planning throughout November and early December 2022 revealed increasingly problematic assumptions about my decision-making authority and their role in managing my independence through institutional care solutions that would have eliminated the professional activities and business relationships that generated their financial security. During a family dinner in early December, David casually mentioned that he had scheduled informational visits to 2 senior living communities for the week before Christmas, apparently assuming that I would participate in institutional care evaluations simply because he had arranged them without consulting my preferences or schedule. "I thought we could visit Meadowbrook Manor and Heritage Hills during Christmas week when everyone has more flexible schedules," David explained, as if elderly care consultations were family activities rather than understanding that institutional care evaluation required individual interest and consent rather than family coordination and scheduling. "Why are you scheduling institutional care visits without asking whether I'm interested in visiting senior living communities?" I asked directly, concerned about their assumption that elderly care decisions could be managed through family planning rather than individual choice and preference. "We just want to explore all the available options while you're still healthy and independent enough to make informed decisions," Jennifer replied, with language that suggested my current independence was temporary and that institutional care was inevitable, rather than understanding that financial security and continued capability made institutional care unnecessary and inappropriate for my specific circumstances. Their assumption that my independence was temporary and that institutional care was inevitable revealed fundamental misunderstanding about my health, financial resources, and professional activities that made their elderly care planning not only inappropriate, but potentially devastating for the business relationships and investment activities that generated their comfortable lifestyle. But David and Jennifer's elderly care planning had escalated beyond research and consultation scheduling to specific implementation timelines and logistics that suggested they viewed institutional care as a definite plan rather than theoretical exploration of elderly care options. "We've been thinking about timing for transitioning to senior community living," Jennifer mentioned during a phone conversation in mid-December, apparently assuming that institutional care was a scheduled transition rather than understanding that I had never agreed to change my living situation or expressed any interest in senior community living arrangements. "What transition timing are you planning?" I asked, testing whether they understood that elderly care transitions required individual decision-making and consent rather than family planning and implementation schedules. "We thought spring might be ideal for making the move while you're still healthy and the weather is good for settling into a new community," David replied with confidence that suggested institutional care was a family decision, rather than understanding that my living situation was my individual choice and that their elderly care planning was presumptuous and inappropriate. Their discussion of transition timing revealed that they had moved beyond exploring elderly care options to making specific plans for implementing institutional care regardless of my preferences or consent, treating my independence as a family management issue rather than individual autonomy that deserved respect and protection. The final escalation of their elderly care planning occurred during the week before Christmas when David called to confirm my participation in the senior community visits that he had scheduled without consulting my preferences or availability. "I wanted to confirm our appointments at Meadowbrook Manor on Tuesday and Heritage Hills on Wednesday," David said during a phone call on December 20th, apparently assuming that I would participate in institutional care evaluations simply because he had scheduled them. "I never agreed to visit senior living communities," I replied firmly, testing whether he understood that elderly care evaluations required individual consent rather than family scheduling and coordination. "But we discussed exploring care options," David responded with obvious frustration that I wasn't cooperating with their elderly care planning. "These are just informational visits to see what's available, if you ever need additional care or safety support." Discussing care options doesn't mean agreeing to visit institutional care facilities, I explained, concerned about his assumption that family conversations about elderly care created obligations for participating in institutional care evaluation, rather than understanding that individual preferences and consent determined appropriate elderly care exploration and decision-making. His frustration with my refusal to participate in institutional care visits revealed that he viewed their elderly care planning as family management rather than individual decision-making, and that he expected my cooperation with their institutional care arrangements, regardless of my preferences or understanding of my actual circumstances and needs. But the most troubling aspect of David and Jennifer's elderly care planning was their assumption that my resistance to institutional care represented unreasonable stubbornness, rather than understanding that I had legitimate reasons for maintaining independent living that they had never bothered to investigate or understand. The stage was set for the December 23rd holiday party that would test whether David and Jennifer understood that elderly relatives deserved respect and autonomy, or whether they would demonstrate the controlling and disrespectful behavior that would justify eliminating their access to the family wealth they had been taking for granted, while planning to optimize away the independence and professional activities that generated their financial security. December 23, 2022, arrived with weather forecasts predicting the worst blizzard Chicago had experienced in 30 years, with temperatures dropping to -15 degrees and wind gusts exceeding 60 miles per hour, creating life-threatening conditions for anyone exposed to the elements without adequate shelter and protection. The Chicago Department of Emergency Management had issued warnings advising residents to avoid unnecessary travel and ensure emergency preparedness for extended power outages and heating system failures. Despite the severe weather warnings, David and Jennifer proceeded with their planned holiday party at their Lake Forest home, apparently viewing their social gathering as more important than safety considerations that should have prompted cancellation or postponement of non-essential activities during dangerous winter weather conditions. "We've prepared for weeks and everyone is expecting to celebrate," Jennifer had explained when I suggested that hosting a party during a severe weather emergency might be inappropriate and potentially dangerous for elderly guests who could be stranded or face transportation difficulties during the storm. "The weather forecast might be exaggerated, and we have a generator and emergency supplies if there are any power issues," David added with the confident dismissal of someone who believed that preparation and technology could eliminate weather-related risks, rather than understanding that severe winter storms created unpredictable and potentially life-threatening situations, regardless of emergency planning and backup systems. Their decision to proceed with the party despite severe weather warnings revealed their priorities and judgment about family safety versus social activities that would prove prophetic when the evening tested their character and family values during the crisis situation that their poor decision-making had created. I arrived at their party wearing appropriate winter clothing including a warm coat, insulated boots, and emergency supplies in case the severe weather created transportation difficulties or safety issues that required extended time outdoors or in vehicles without adequate heating during the dangerous winter storm conditions. The party proceeded normally for the first few hours, with guests enjoying dinner and conversation while the wind began intensifying outside and snow accumulation started exceeding the Weather Service predictions for storm severity and duration. By 9 p.m., the blizzard had reached dangerous intensity levels that made travel extremely hazardous and prompted several guests to leave early, while road conditions were still manageable. As the evening progressed and weather conditions continued deteriorating, the remaining guests began discussing departure logistics and transportation safety during the increasingly dangerous storm conditions. Most families with elderly relatives or young children had left by 10 p.m., recognizing that delay could result in being stranded overnight or facing life-threatening travel conditions if the storm continued intensifying as predicted. "Mom, you should probably stay overnight rather than trying to drive home in this weather," David suggested around 10:30 p.m. as wind gusts began shaking the house and snow accumulation reached dangerous levels that had already made several roads impassable throughout the northern suburbs. "I prefer to return to my own home rather than staying overnight," I replied, testing whether they understood that elderly people often had legitimate preferences for sleeping in familiar environments and maintaining their daily routines even during emergency situations that might require flexibility and accommodation. "But the roads are getting dangerous and the weather forecast shows continued deterioration through the night," Jennifer added with apparent concern for my safety during the severe winter storm conditions. I'm prepared for winter weather and my vehicle has emergency equipment and four-wheel drive capability, I explained, indicating that I had appropriate preparation and transportation resources for managing winter travel safely, while preferring to maintain my independence and comfort by returning to my own home. But as we discussed departure timing and transportation logistics, the conversation revealed David and Jennifer's true attitudes about my independence and their responsibility for my safety and comfort during the emergency weather situation that their decision to host a party during a severe storm had created. Actually, Mom, this seems like a perfect opportunity to discuss the senior living options we've been researching, Jennifer said with obvious calculation, apparently viewing the severe weather emergency as leverage for pressuring me into institutional care discussions rather than focusing on immediate safety and transportation needs during the dangerous storm conditions. Situations like this demonstrate why independent living creates unnecessary risks and family stress, David added, revealing that he viewed the weather emergency as evidence supporting their elderly care planning rather than understanding that emergency situations required family cooperation and support, rather than using crisis conditions to pressure elderly relatives into institutional care compliance. Their comments revealed that they were using the severe weather situation as an opportunity to advance their elderly care agenda rather than focusing on my immediate safety and comfort during the dangerous storm conditions that their poor judgment about hosting a party had created. I need transportation home rather than elderly care lectures during a winter storm emergency, I replied firmly, testing whether they understood that emergency situations required practical assistance rather than using crisis conditions to pressure elderly relatives into institutional care discussions and compliance. But this weather demonstrates exactly why senior community living would provide better safety and eliminate these kinds of emergency transportation issues, Jennifer persisted with obvious determination to use the storm emergency for advancing their institutional care planning rather than providing the assistance and support that family members should offer during dangerous weather conditions. Transportation assistance would demonstrate family support better than using emergency weather to pressure me into institutional care discussions, I responded, concerned about their priorities during a situation that required family cooperation and practical help, rather than opportunistic pressure for elderly care compliance. But David and Jennifer's response to my request for transportation assistance revealed their true character and priorities when they believed they had leverage over my independence and could use emergency circumstances to advance their elderly care agenda without considering my immediate safety and comfort needs. Maybe experiencing some inconvenience during severe weather would help you understand the practical advantages of senior community living, David said with obvious calculation, suggesting that he was willing to use emergency weather conditions to create pressure for institutional care compliance, rather than providing family assistance during dangerous storm conditions. We're not comfortable driving in this weather either, Jennifer added with diplomatic language that avoided directly refusing transportation assistance, while indicating that they weren't willing to provide family support during the emergency situation that their decision to host a party during severe weather had created. Their reluctance to provide transportation assistance during dangerous weather conditions while simultaneously using the emergency situation to pressure me into elderly care discussions revealed character flaws and family relationship problems that demonstrated their true priorities and values when crisis situations tested their commitment to family support and elderly relative care. Are you refusing to provide transportation assistance during a severe weather emergency? I asked directly, testing whether they understood that family obligations included providing practical help during dangerous situations, rather than using emergency conditions as leverage for advancing elderly care agendas that served their convenience rather than my safety and welfare. We're suggesting that staying overnight would be safer for everyone rather than anyone driving in these dangerous conditions, David replied, with language that avoided acknowledging that their refusal to provide transportation was based on their desire to use the emergency situation for pressuring me into elderly care compliance, rather than genuine concern for safety and family welfare. But you're also using this weather emergency to pressure me into institutional care discussions, rather than focusing on immediate transportation and safety needs, I pointed out, concerned about their manipulation of emergency circumstances for advancing their elderly care planning, rather than providing appropriate family support during dangerous weather conditions. We're just noting that situations like this demonstrate the practical advantages of senior community living with professional transportation and emergency services, Jennifer responded with continued determination to use the weather emergency for elderly care pressure, rather than acknowledging that their refusal to provide transportation assistance was inappropriate and potentially dangerous for elderly relatives during severe weather conditions. Their continued focus on elderly care advantages during a weather emergency while refusing transportation assistance revealed that they viewed my immediate safety and comfort as less important than advancing their institutional care agenda, demonstrating character flaws and family relationship problems that violated the respect and family unity required to maintain access to the trust fund distributions that had been supporting their lifestyle. As the weather conditions continued deteriorating and their refusal to provide transportation assistance became increasingly clear, I realized that this emergency situation was revealing David and Jennifer's true character and priorities, when they believed they had power over my circumstances and could use crisis conditions to achieve their elderly care objectives, without regard for my immediate safety and welfare. "Since you're refusing transportation assistance, I'll arrange my own transportation home," I announced, testing whether they would allow an elderly relative to face dangerous weather conditions alone rather than providing family support during an emergency situation. "You can't call a taxi or rideshare service in this weather," David replied, with obvious satisfaction that my transportation options were limited, apparently viewing my limited alternatives as leverage for pressuring me into staying overnight and participating in elderly care discussions rather than focusing on practical solutions for my safety and comfort. "Then I'll walk to the main road and find transportation," I said firmly, indicating that I was prepared to face dangerous weather conditions rather than staying overnight and submitting to their elderly care pressure during the emergency situation they had created through poor judgment about hosting a party during severe weather warnings. "You can't walk in this blizzard," Jennifer responded with apparent alarm that I was prepared to face life-threatening weather conditions rather than accepting their elderly care agenda, but without offering alternative transportation assistance that would have demonstrated genuine family concern for my safety and welfare. "Then provide transportation assistance instead of using this weather emergency to pressure me into elderly care compliance," I replied, offering them a final opportunity to demonstrate family support and appropriate character during the crisis situation that was testing their values and priorities when they believed they had power over my circumstances. But David and Jennifer's response to this final opportunity revealed their complete character and priorities in a way that justified eliminating their access to the family wealth they had been taking for granted while planning to optimize away my independence and professional activities. "Mom, maybe this is exactly the wake-up call you need about the impracticality of trying to maintain independence at your age," David said with cruel calculation, apparently believing that forcing me to face dangerous weather conditions would create pressure for institutional care compliance, rather than understanding that his behavior was demonstrating character flaws that violated every principle of family respect and elderly care. "These kinds of emergency situations will only get worse as you get older, and senior community living would eliminate all these transportation and safety issues," Jennifer added with obvious determination to use the life-threatening weather conditions as leverage for their elderly care agenda, rather than providing the family support and assistance that emergency situations required. Their willingness to allow an elderly relative to face life-threatening weather conditions, rather than providing transportation assistance, while simultaneously using the emergency situation to pressure me into institutional care compliance, revealed character flaws and family relationship problems that completely justified eliminating their access to family wealth and trust fund distributions. "Since you're refusing family assistance during a weather emergency while using dangerous conditions to pressure me into institutional care, I'll manage my own transportation and remember this demonstration of your true character and priorities," I announced, preparing to leave their house and face the blizzard conditions rather than submitting to their manipulation and elderly care pressure. "Mom, you're being completely unreasonable about practical safety considerations," David called after me as I moved toward the door, apparently still believing that their behavior was appropriate and that I was being stubborn, rather than understanding that they had revealed character flaws that violated every principle of family responsibility and elderly respect. "We're trying to help you understand realistic limitations and practical care options," Jennifer added, still attempting to frame their refusal to provide emergency transportation as caring elderly care guidance rather than recognizing that their behavior during the crisis situation had demonstrated selfishness and manipulation that justified permanent consequences for their treatment of elderly relatives. As I reached their front door and prepared to face the life-threatening blizzard conditions, rather than submitting to their elderly care pressure, David made the comment that sealed their fate and justified eliminating their access to family wealth permanently. Fine, if you want to be a stubborn burden who can't accept help or make practical decisions about your own safety, then learn to take care of yourself, David announced with obvious cruelty and frustration that I wasn't cooperating with their elderly care agenda during the emergency situation. Maybe facing some real consequences for your unrealistic independence will help you understand why senior living is the appropriate choice for elderly people who can't manage practical decision-making, Jennifer added with final confirmation of their character and priorities when crisis situations tested their commitment to family support and elderly relative care. Their willingness to call me a burden and refuse emergency transportation assistance while forcing me to face life-threatening weather conditions revealed complete disrespect for elderly relatives and violation of every principle of family responsibility that justified eliminating their access to trust fund distributions and family wealth permanently. I walked out into the blizzard without a coat, leaving it behind in their house as evidence of their refusal to provide basic family assistance during dangerous weather conditions, and faced the life-threatening storm conditions rather than submitting to their manipulation and elderly care pressure that had revealed their true character when they believed they had power over my circumstances. The -15-degree temperature and 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts created life-threatening conditions that could have killed an elderly person within minutes of exposure, but I was prepared for winter weather emergencies and managed to reach shelter and transportation that allowed me to return safely to my own home while remembering every detail of their behavior during the crisis situation that had tested their character and family values. But David and Jennifer had no idea that the elderly relative they had called a burden and abandoned in life-threatening weather conditions actually controlled the trust fund that had been financing their luxury lifestyle for 15 years. Or that their behavior during the emergency situation had provided complete justification for eliminating their access to family wealth and implementing consequences that would teach them the true cost of disrespecting elderly relatives and violating family responsibilities. The consequences for David and Jennifer began immediately as I implemented the trust fund modifications and family financial restructuring that their behavior during the weather emergency had completely justified through their demonstration of character flaws and family relationship problems that violated every principle of elderly respect and family unity. Within 24 hours of their refusal to provide emergency transportation assistance while calling me a burden during life-threatening weather conditions, I had executed legal documents that eliminated their access to trust fund distributions permanently and redirected their family financial support to charitable organizations that actually demonstrated respect for elderly people and family values. The Thornfield Family Trust Modification Documents, prepared by our estate planning attorneys and executed immediately after the December 23rd weather emergency, eliminated David and Jennifer's eligibility for trust distributions while maintaining educational funding for Emma and Jacob that would be managed through independent trustees who would ensure appropriate character development and family values education. David's supplemental income of $180,000 annually from trust fund distributions disappeared immediately, reducing his family's total income to his pharmaceutical sales earnings of $95,000 annually, and eliminating their ability to maintain their luxury lifestyle, private school tuitions, and expensive home mortgage payments without dramatic lifestyle adjustments and financial restructuring. Jennifer's ability to remain unemployed while focusing on elderly care optimization ended immediately as their family income reduction required dual professional earnings to maintain even basic middle-class lifestyle standards, forcing her to seek employment after 15 years of unemployment that had been possible only through trust fund financial support. The mortgage assistance and property tax support that had allowed them to maintain their $2.8 million Lake Forest home ended immediately, creating financial pressure that would force them to sell their house and relocate to housing appropriate for their actual earned income, rather than the luxury lifestyle that trust fund distributions had been supporting. Emma and Jacob's private school tuition payments ended immediately, requiring their enrollment in public schools and elimination of the expensive extracurricular activities and college preparation programs that had been funded through trust distributions rather than David's pharmaceutical sales income. But beyond the immediate financial consequences, David and Jennifer discovered that their behavior during the weather emergency had been observed and evaluated by someone whose industry influence could affect their professional opportunities and social standing throughout the Chicago metropolitan area, where reputation and character assessments influenced employment opportunities and community relationships. Within 1 week of the December 23 incident, David's pharmaceutical company received detailed information about his character and family behavior during emergency situations, including his willingness to abandon elderly relatives during life-threatening weather conditions, while pursuing personal agendas that demonstrated selfishness and disrespect for family obligations and elderly care responsibilities. Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals, which served healthcare providers throughout the Chicago region, relied on relationships with medical professionals who valued character and family responsibility as indicators of professional reliability and ethical behavior in business relationships. David's treatment of elderly relatives during emergency situations raised concerns about his character and judgment that affected his relationships with healthcare providers and pharmaceutical industry colleagues. Within 2 weeks, David found that several major healthcare clients had discontinued their business relationships with him, citing concerns about character and professional reliability that had been raised through industry networking and professional reputation assessments that considered family behavior and elderly care as indicators of overall character and business ethics. Jennifer's employment search revealed that her 15-year absence from professional work, combined with industry knowledge of her elderly care planning and behavior during family emergency situations, made her unemployable in healthcare marketing and professional services that valued character and family responsibility as indicators of employee reliability and client relationship management capabilities. The Chicago professional community, particularly in healthcare and family-related industries, maintained informal networks that assessed character and family behavior as indicators of professional reliability and ethical conduct. Jennifer's treatment of elderly relatives and her approach to family emergency management raised concerns about her judgment and priorities that affected her employment opportunities throughout the region. Within 1 month of the December 23 incident, David and Jennifer had lost their primary source of supplemental income, faced elimination of mortgage assistance and property tax support, encountered professional consequences that reduced David's pharmaceutical sales opportunities, and discovered that Jennifer's employment prospects were limited by reputation concerns about character and family responsibility that affected her attractiveness to employers throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. The luxury lifestyle that they had assumed was permanent and automatic inheritance proved to be discretionary financial support that could be eliminated based on character assessment and behavior evaluation that demonstrated whether family members deserved continued access to generational wealth and trust fund distributions. Their assumptions about elderly care planning and family management revealed fundamental misunderstanding about the source of their financial security and the respect required to maintain access to family wealth that had been supporting their comfortable lifestyle, while they planned to optimize away the independence and professional activities that generated their prosperity. By spring 2023, David and Jennifer had been forced to sell their Lake Forest home and relocate to a modest apartment appropriate for their pharmaceutical sales income without trust fund supplementation. Their children had enrolled in public schools and eliminated expensive extracurricular activities that had been funded through family wealth rather than earned income. David's pharmaceutical sales territory had been reduced due to client relationship problems and professional reputation concerns that affected his income potential and career advancement opportunities within the healthcare industry. Jennifer remained unemployed despite extensive job searching that had revealed the employment consequences of character and family behavior assessments that influenced hiring decisions throughout the Chicago professional community. The comprehensive financial and professional consequences that David and Jennifer faced during spring 2023 provided ongoing education about the true cost of disrespecting elderly relatives and violating family responsibilities during emergency situations that tested character and priorities when crisis conditions revealed true values and family commitment levels. Their attempts to restore their financial security through family reconciliation and elderly care apologies proved unsuccessful because their behavior during the December 23 weather emergency had demonstrated character flaws and family relationship problems that violated the fundamental principles of elderly respect and family unity that Robert and I had established as requirements for access to generational wealth and trust fund distributions. The trust fund documents that had been modified based on their emergency weather behavior included permanent elimination of their eligibility for family financial support, with no provision for restoration based on future behavior improvements or character development efforts that might demonstrate changed priorities and family values. But the most significant consequence of their behavior was the loss of family relationships and elderly support that had provided emotional connection and family heritage preservation, in addition to financial benefits. Their treatment of me during the emergency situation had eliminated not only their access to family wealth, but also their connection to family traditions and elderly wisdom that represented cultural heritage and family identity beyond just financial advantages. Today, 5 years after abandoning me in a blizzard while calling me a burden, David works as a pharmaceutical sales representative earning $75,000 annually after territory reductions and client relationship problems affected his income potential and career advancement opportunities. Jennifer works part-time as a healthcare marketing assistant, earning $35,000 annually in a position that requires evening and weekend hours while providing minimal professional advancement opportunities. They live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a middle-class suburb, with their children attending public schools and participating in limited extracurricular activities that their reduced family income can support without the trust fund distributions that had been eliminated based on their emergency weather behavior and character assessment. Their attempts to rebuild their financial security through independent professional success have been limited by the reputation consequences and character assessments that continue affecting their employment opportunities and client relationships throughout the Chicago metropolitan area, where family behavior and elderly care are considered indicators of professional reliability and ethical conduct. The winter evening when they refused to provide emergency transportation assistance while calling me a burden cost them over $3 million in eliminated trust fund distributions during the past 5 years, with projected lifetime losses exceeding $15 million in family wealth and inheritance benefits that would have supported their children's education and their own retirement security. But beyond the financial consequences, David and Jennifer lost access to family relationships and elderly wisdom that had provided cultural heritage and family identity that cannot be restored through professional success or financial recovery efforts. Their behavior during the emergency situation eliminated their connection to family traditions and generational knowledge that represented their children's cultural heritage and family history. The Thornfield Family Trust continues supporting family members who demonstrate character and family responsibility while maintaining respect for elderly relatives and family unity. The Trust's annual distributions of $8-12 million now support charitable organizations throughout the Chicago metropolitan area that provide elderly care, family support services, and emergency assistance for families facing weather emergencies and crisis situations. My continued independence and professional activities maintain the investment income and business relationships that generate substantial returns for the Trust, while supporting family members who understand that generational wealth requires maintaining family relationships and demonstrating the character that justifies access to family prosperity and inheritance benefits. The modest home where David and Jennifer had planned to optimize my independence through institutional care continues serving as headquarters for investment activities and professional relationships that manage over $400 million in assets while providing financial security for family members who respect elderly relatives and maintain family unity and character development. Sometimes the most important lesson you can teach entitled family members is that elderly relatives aren't burdens to be managed through institutional care planning, but valuable family members whose lifetime achievements and continued professional excellence create the prosperity that enables younger generations to live comfortably while sometimes forgetting the source and requirements of their financial security. David and Jennifer learned that elderly people who appear to need family assistance during emergency situations may actually control the financial resources that determine whether younger family members maintain their comfortable lifestyle or face permanent consequences for violating family responsibilities and demonstrating character flaws that justify eliminating access to generational wealth and trust fund distributions. The December 23 blizzard that seemed like an opportunity to pressure me into elderly care compliance became the most expensive weather emergency of their lives, teaching them that family wealth comes with obligations for maintaining respectful relationships and providing family support during crisis situations that test character and priorities when emergency conditions reveal true values in family commitment. What would you have done if your own family abandoned you during a life-threatening weather emergency while calling you a burden and using dangerous conditions to pressure you into institutional care that would have eliminated your independence and professional activities? Have you ever encountered family members who assumed they could manipulate elderly relatives through crisis situations while taking financial benefits for granted? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if this story has inspired you to examine your own assumptions about elderly relatives and family responsibilities, and the importance of treating family wealth as discretionary support that requires maintaining character and family relationships, rather than automatic inheritance that continues regardless of behavior and respect levels. And if you found this story of family consequences and financial justice resonating with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of people who discovered that disrespecting elderly relatives and violating family responsibilities can result in consequences more expensive than they could ever imagine and more permanent than justice usually provides in family relationships. Remember, family wealth isn't automatic inheritance. It's discretionary support that requires maintaining character, family relationships, and respect for elderly relatives whose lifetime achievements created the prosperity that younger generations often take for granted, while sometimes failing to understand the effort and respect required to preserve access to generational wealth and family financial security that can disappear permanently based on behavior during crisis situations that test true character and family values.